kids. So I think it's a program that seems to be well received. We've got about 15 students in each school right now, and I think will be more students of all these classes next year. 15 was an optimum number that was set through the curriculum by the program administrators. I think we could probably handle a little more. We're probably going to start with more next year. We certainly will in the two junior and senior years. We'll have a lot more kids involved in these programs. Our EMS Academy program, which is in partnership with the Minneapolis Foundation, is a second program that we have got going that we're going to be kicking off in March of this year. That is more or less an adult education type program where we can take adults within the city targeting Minneapolis residents, women, and low-income applicants who are going to enter into an EMS program sponsored by the Minneapolis Foundation in partnership with Hennepin County, which is going to, when they get done with the 16-week program, which will there be a slight stipend paid to the applicants and the participants of the program will be given a stipend, and now upon graduation will also be EMTs. There again, Hennepin County is looking at this pool of candidates or graduates as potential candidates for possibly paramedic school, EMT training that they want to have, EMT responsibilities that they are going to potentially have. So they may be looking at an employee pool that we can hopefully provide maybe an opportunity in the fire service and the fire department of Minneapolis, but also working with Atlanta and the other healthcare providers around the city to try to connect the dots and connect them right into an employment opportunity. So I think it's a very exciting program. Both these programs are very exciting, and it's fun to see the kids. We took the kids to North High up to our EOTF here just recently, and just gave them an opportunity to squirt some water and put their hands in the hoses and have an introduction to what a firefighter might do. And it was amazing, the joy in some of their faces, although there was one student who just was, no doubt that she was going to be a Minneapolis police officer. And I tried to sway her, but it was a challenge for me. She was, even after that day, she was still going to be a police officer, but I just wanted to let my friend Rhonda know that I'm going to keep working on that individual, see if we can sway them. But it's really fun to be able to be part of that. And I think we could have a unique opportunity, much like a lot of the programs that the MPD also puts on, that we can have an impact in these kids' lives. And I think it's important that we do that. So I think, we do a lot more than just put the wet stuff on the red stuff. You know, it's important that we do that, but there are a lot of other opportunities that I think we need to take as a department to move forward and to be leaning forward on a lot of these issues that are going to face us in the future. And then finally, the third of our programs with the Explorer program, which is going to be focused on the youth from 14 to 21. That's going to take a younger youth, and hopefully we can kick that off right towards the end of the school year of this year to keep the kids connected to some type of potential leadership development program and maybe at a career in exploration, looking at maybe a potential career in the fire service. These kids will probably meet once or twice a month at the EOTF. Throughout the summer, and it'll be an ongoing program, like I said, from 14 to 21 years old. So we sort of got, we got the high school programs, we got the EMS Academy, we got the Explorer programs, we got a lot of balls in here, so to speak, to sort of juggle. But I'm proud to say we've hired Erica Prosser to help coordinate those programs, done a good job working with staff and moving these programs forward. So it's something that we look very, very forward to, not only from the fall of 15, but entering into 16. One thing I also want to mention, working with Fleet and on the CARS program, working with finance, I'd like to say that we have our apparatus replacement program back on track. It was a little bit off track for a few years. That is back on track. We've taken delivery in the last 3 years of 13 new engine companies, 2 ladder companies, an aerial platform. I think that 15-year program is back on track. We got a couple of challenges that are going to face the department in 2019. We're working with Fleet at this time to try to work through those challenges and try to minimize the impact that it may have on budget in those out years. So I feel very, very good about that. One big challenge in 2016 that I know we're going to work on here right after the next month or so. We got to start talking about and looking at how we are going to create a new hiring process for the department. Our list is going to be, our civil service list is going to be running out here and coming due in a few months. We're about a year out from starting testing. I'm going to take a very, very long, hard look at the process we use working with HR in identifying any of the gaps that we have, because we certainly have, as diverse as we are as a department, we have very difficult challenges maintaining that diversity, especially when it comes to to women of color. I want to make sure we identify those areas, identify those challenges. If there's gaps in our process, I want to make sure those gaps are filled. And that includes probably even engaging some of the community leadership out there to assist us in some of the areas that we have fallen short in the past. And I want to do that opening up the next few months of 2016. I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about 2016. I feel very solid about the budget that we have. I believe I'm going to come in on or under budget in 2016. I'm very confident about that. Hopefully, with a little more depth in this organization, I can create some budget surplus, which I can then turn around to use for other needs that we have within our department. And I guess at this point, that's a very brief overview, but I wanted to open up for questions to the committee to leave some time to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Frito, thank you for all this great work that you're doing. I know that last cycle we were supportive of the budget option that leads to the firefighter development initiatives in our high schools, and I know that amount was $200,000. Is that in an ongoing way? And you mentioned 15 students, but from different schools. Do you mean that this supports a total of 15 students at this level of funding? And is this an ongoing initiative? This right now, the funding for the programs that we received this year's budget was not necessarily ongoing. It was not going to be ongoing. But I'll have to say this: when I started those programs, I knew that I was going to commit to these programs, and I was going to find a way. And I was going to find a way and sustainability is always challenging. And I can't always rely on coming before council and or before committee to look, and before the mayor and look for funding. I think it's important that as a department head, I have a responsibility to look for that funding, whether it be internally or look through outside opportunities that we have to partner with to help offset some of those costs. And we have done that. I know there may be some additional costs we haven't seen yet, but hopefully we're in a position that I want these programs to be sustainable. The last thing I want to see is put a young man or woman in a program and suddenly you say, well, thank you very much. I'm out of money. I'm sorry. I don't want to be able to do that. I want to be the type of person who's going to stand up and have an ongoing sustainable program that is going to have an impact and a sustainable impact for our youth. These are the kinds of programs that grow and get more successful over time. So is there 15 students that are supported by this amount of money so far?
Yeah, when you look at, we have some outside contractual costs in terms of instruction that we have for these programs. So I think I don't know that we will necessarily use all that money. We still have some unknowns in these programs as of yet. We just don't know for sure. There is certainly an unknown, and I can ask Erica that could probably speak to that, who's been very much close to this program in the coordination of those. And I'll ask her to come up if you have something you want to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Palmisano. So our budget runs, the city's budget runs from January to December, and the school year doesn't match up with that. So during this school year, we have a total of 30 students, 15 at North, 15 at Roosevelt. When the school year starts next year, we'll have juniors, 15 at North, 15 at South, and we'll also have seniors next year. So we will have 60 total students during the next school year.
And then theoretically,
then ongoing,
that, or it would stay.
It won't increase. It'll probably stay about the same. The instructors that teach emergency medical technician program like to keep the class size about 15.
Thank you. This is a promising program.
Thank you, Erica.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in social media, I saw that we had another, somebody ran into one of our ladders accident, and the ladder, according to the person that posted it, had just been repaired. What does a new ladder cost, Chief? And when you say we're back on track for our replacement of our apparatus, were we behind, or and I guess I wasn't aware of that.
Council President Johnson, Chairman Yang, if we look at the typical life expectancy of the two rigs, one is a pumper which carries a hose and a hook and ladder, so to speak. An average pumper is roughly about 15 years. Same with the hook and ladder, about a 15-year life expectancy. So we have a process set up that as these rigs start to age, we start to kind of do the hand-me-down. They go out to the slower stations, we get new ones, and we sort of just eventually set up that process. For a few years, when we were hit by some of the budget issues we had in the city, that got off track, and we delayed the purchasing of vehicles. And then suddenly, as soon as that starts to happen, our repair costs and all those costs just go skyrocketing and pretty soon we're fixing an apparatus that's not even worth near the cost of repairs. So to answer your question about the price of a new ladder company, that can run anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million. And I can stand here today and say, as the chief of this department, you spend $1 million on a fire truck and you give it to a young man or woman to drive. It is very scary out there, because now they're driving $1 million emergency vehicle out in the streets. And with all the traffic we have in the winter and slippery conditions, we hate talking about accidents, because the minute you start talking about them, it just starts to ring that bell. And we've had a couple of recent accidents that either our fire trucks have been hit, they've been rear-ended, and so then there's a program in place to go back after the insurance companies with working with the risk management. They go after the insurance companies, and we recoup some of the cost of those repairs. I'm really glad to say now that program has evolved, and now when in the past we would fix those vehicles that come out of our budget, and we would that money would never be put back in our budget. Now there's a process where it eventually finds its way back, because I've been kind of bird dogging that a little bit, talking about, okay, where's the money go? And so it's been, we have had a rash of accidents. So I'm going to admit we have had a rash of accidents, and we are going to take the appropriate action and just raise everybody's awareness of just how big these vehicles are, how much they cost, the impact that we have not only in repairs of these accidents, but they're a big emergency vehicle, and it's challenging right now, and it's been an ongoing bit of a concern, and we continue to remind and train our folks on the importance of maintaining these apparatus.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Chief, thank you.
Thank you.
The next department up is 911.
Okay, good afternoon, Committee Chair Yang, Vice Chair Gordon, and committee members. My name is Christine McPherson. I am the Assistant Director for the Minneapolis Emergency Communications 911 Department. I will be presenting today. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to talk about what we did in 2015 in 911 and then some of our priorities for 2016. Some of those priorities remain the same year to year, but it's hiring and training, strengthening some of our existing programs, implementing best practices in technology and operations. I'll get right to probably the most interesting slide in my presentation today, which is our 911 answer times for 2015. In May, Minneapolis implemented a new 911 phone system in partnership with a number of other 911 centers. One of the many benefits that we have on this new system is an increased ability to report on 911 answering statistics. We continue to work on optimizing a lot of that system and learning more about it. And as we've done so, we've been able to make some improvements in how calls are presented to be answered. But one important measurement is the speed of answer. And so this chart talks a little bit about where we're at now. As of December, we've been able to meet the NFPA and proposed national standard of answering 95% of all incoming 911 calls in 15 seconds or less and 99% in under 40 seconds. In addition, we try to do reporting on where we are with complaints and a quality assurance report. As you can see, we were up a bit in 2014. That there was a lot more about 911 in the news in 2014, and a lot of those complaints are also internal. But in 2015, we're back down to about where we normally are, both for the number of complaints received and the number of complaints sustained. So we're doing much better there. In addition, our quality assurance program is becoming more robust. Coming up in 2016, we are hiring a quality assurance and training manager to continue to develop that program. But we're continuing to do more quality assurance checks, which gives feedback to our employees to allow them to improve, while also giving us an idea of what we need to improve on. Also related to the 911 phone system is some information about our call volume. Historically, for years, we've reported on incoming 911 and non-911 calls. With the new system, we can also measure the outgoing calls that our employees are making. Most of those are related to incoming 911 calls, so it's important information to have when we're looking at and trying to figure out what the actual work is that's being done in the department. So as you can see, in 2015, our incoming 911 and non-911 calls were about 592,000, but when you add the outgoing calls to that, it's about 811,000 calls that were managed in the center. As Chief Friedel indicated, the number of fire incidents have been going up, so have the number of police incidents that we've been receiving and dispatching. The number for police and fire that you're seeing here are the incidents that we received 911 or other calls for and then dispatched. The actual number of police incidents in 2015, for example, was over 470,000. So this is accounting for the work that was being done by our staff. In reality, that 470,000 also included some work by our staff because they were typing that information into the computer, acknowledging the information on the radio from the officers, and so on. Other things in 911, many of you know we've been working on a cross-training project for the last 4 years. 2016 is our 5th and final year of this project. We are on target to complete this in January of 2017. We have just 5 employees remaining to be cross-trained into the dispatcher roles, and 16 people have already been successful learning those roles, and a few more are still in training. Um, 911 Supervisor Mariam Williams has been leading our community outreach efforts in 911 for several years. And as of 2015, she's formed a partnership with NCR to allow us more access to reach out to the community via several events. And there's a list here of many of the events that we were able to participate in 2015, and we're hoping to have even more in 2016. In 2016, we want to continue to work with the Minneapolis Police Department's community teams, as well as NCR, our SAFE teams, and the community groups. We also are focusing on 911 readiness and understanding access to 911, especially for groups that may be underrepresented in reporting or calling 911. We continue to have a robust language line interpreter service. We had 4,600 calls for 22 different languages in 2015 that we interpreted in 911. Technology, I mentioned we were trying to implement technology that both supports and makes the work easier for those that work in 911. In 2015, we had the 3 major systems that are in 911 all received upgrades or were improved or got new versions. That includes the computer-aided dispatch program, the new 911 phone system that I mentioned, and we are about halfway through the process of implementing the new radio system that was purchased or improved, upgraded. In 2016, we're looking at a First Watch implementation for our phone and CAD that will allow us to tie a lot of the phone data to the CAD data and maybe get a better true picture of what exactly the work is that's coming in and how it's being done, and look at areas where we could improve. For best practices, we have a request for proposal out for our protocols call handling system. And we're working on redesigning our training room, which is also the backup emergency operations center for the city, as well as our routine software and hardware upgrades. Similar to what the fire department mentioned, we are also working on some pathways projects. We do have a joint grant application with HR, the county, 311, working with Hennepin Technical to create a workforce pathways project for people to understand and know about jobs in 911 and be ready to be successful in those roles. We did recently just have the 911 dispatcher job open for application. It closed last Friday with over 720 applications, many of those from city residents, so we're very hopeful for that. In addition, we have a class starting in March of 6 to 8 new 911 staff. So that actually concludes my presentation for today, but I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you. Council President Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so pleased to hear that we had all those applicants. I think that you gave out a lot of information, that it did not require a college degree, that kind of thing. I think the more, it encourages people to apply if they understand that they, the basic requirements for the job right in when we're saying the position is open. So I'm really pleased that we had such a good pool. My question, one question is this Minnesota Pathways to Prosperity, is that a state program or something?
My understanding is it would be a joint collaboration between the city as a government entity. There would need to be a community-based organization, which they're still finalizing, and then a learning partner, which is Hennepin Technical College.
And so who would fund it?
Heather, I'll let Heather respond
Okay.
to that question.
Just real briefly, it's through the State Department of Education and Economics Development.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon?
Well, I really appreciate the report, and also that we're hitting our targets, or we were at the end of the we did for the whole year actually when we're averaged out. So that was fantastic news. I just wanted to note that. You also made me start wondering about the diversity of the staff and the makeup with the Pathways project, and you made me wish I raised this also with the fire department, because of course they're talking a lot about how can they recruit from the city and those kinds of things. Probably don't have this information at the top of your head, but it might be interesting for us to understand what is the racial, age, ethnic mix of the 911 operators at some point.
Okay, we can definitely report back on that. I can tell you the class that we just recently hired, of the 5 people that completed training, 2 of them were originally non-English speakers. So we're definitely aiming to increase diversity.
And that must help a lot with when there's translation needed. I mean, do we pay extra for a bilingual, multilingual 911 operator at this point?
So the state of Minnesota's 911 program actually pays for all 911 phone call translation in the state of Minnesota. So that every resident in the state has the exact same access to a 911 translator, whether they're calling 911 in Minneapolis or up in Duluth. The state manages that contract, and we work very closely with them to make sure that we have a good contract in place for speedy translations and having translators that are up to the job.
So, but if we have a multilingual 911 operator, they will switch languages to understand the call, or do we always use the translation service?
Councilmember Gordon, we generally always use the translator service. A lot of times the person that would speak another language isn't on duty, or they're on another 911 call at the time that call would come in. We are looking at being able to use some of those employees, however, in the future going forward, and some of that community outreach and doing the community meetings with our supervisors.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council President Johnson? Okay. Ms. McPherson, a couple questions, but Councilmember Palmson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you speak a little bit to the ongoing training of our 911 operators that they get, as they continue in the job and as we see different events come to light where there's been a communication problem through a 911 operator, not here, but in other places? Do we do regular kind of not refresher training, but help people deal with new situations and new possibilities? So can you speak a little bit to what we do with our existing operators on a yearly basis?
Yes, Councilmember Yang and Councilmember Palmisano, thank you for that question. We do continuing education training with all of our staff. At a minimum, we do training twice a year in the fall and the spring that we call ongoing training. A lot of it this past year was taken up with the training for the new systems that we're going in, but we still did some of that training. And in March, we're planning to do the police department's fair and impartial police training program for all of our staff as well, just for some awareness and give them some tools when they're handling 911 calls.
Thank you.
Ms. McPherson, a couple of questions. The first question is with regards to the cross training. We're almost done with that, and I think I wasn't here when it started, but let me just ask. There's this fear that we're going to lose people because of that. Did we lose anybody because of that, and how did that go?
Councilmember Yang, thank you for the question. Actually, no, I would say we have not lost anyone directly because of the cross training. We have one employee who was a part of the cross training that voluntarily left for other reasons. But to date, we haven't had anyone that has not been successful with the cross training. There have been some, however, that have left because they did not desire to try it. Okay. On the contrary, there are several employees that wish they'd tried it several years earlier and really enjoy the variety in their jobs. So. Okay.
And my last question is, you did some numbers with regards to call times that. Let me pull it up here quick. 95% of calls answered in 15 seconds or less, 99% of phone calls answered in 40 seconds or less. And my question to you is, those outliers that are the 1% or the 5% that don't get answered, let's say in 15 seconds or 40 seconds or less. Sometimes those are the phone calls that we eventually get as council members complaining about why the heck did it take 2 minutes or 5 minutes for 911 to answer our phone call. And I guess my question to you is, in those situations, how should we handle that? And would it be best if we just said, look, I can connect you with Ms. McPherson or Ms. Hunt just to have a conversation about that? Because, clearly we care about those phone calls. We don't want them to happen, but what should we do about those?
Well, certainly I would continue to forward those calls to the 911 department. Again, the goal is 99% of all calls in that 40 seconds. So as you alluded to, there will always be those outliers. We look at our staffing actually on an hourly basis, not just a yearly basis. And so we're constantly balancing our staffing to have the best answer times around the clock. But it is impossible at this point to have enough people working. The department is not sized to have 911 calls all be able to be immediately answered. That would require almost doubling the workforce as well as the number of workstations available. That said, this is a national standard across the country. Many agencies are having the same thing, and that's why the goal is 99%. I even look at reports on how many people get a busy signal if there's more 911 calls coming in than what we have 911 lines available.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. The next department is the City Attorney's Office, the Criminal Division. And Ms. Hang, before you start, can you let us know where the Civil Division reports to?
Oh.
And if you don't know, don't worry about it.
Peter's in Cancun, so I'm sure he'll be telecommuting in to do that. Chair Yang, fellow members of the committee, my name is Mary Ellen Hang. I am the Deputy City Attorney for the Criminal Division. I will be presenting today. Ms. Siegel is out of town for the day. She'll be back tomorrow. Before we get into some specifics of what we did in 2015, 2016, I just want to kind of do a very quick overview of kind of what we do, because I think it kind of frames our accomplishments in 2015 and what we're doing in 2016. So, we prosecute all of the adult misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, and petty misdemeanors that occur in the city of Minneapolis. We prosecute crimes. Our main focus is on domestic assaults, DWIs, weapons offenses, our low-level livability offenses that you hear a lot about from your community members that affect the quality of life, a lot of theft-related offenses, and a lot of traffic offenses. Just a brief look at how we're divided. We do divide up our work into 4 teams. I have 3 supervising attorneys beneath me that help supervise our team. We have a team that focuses solely on domestic abuse. We have kind of our community attorney special prosecutions program where we focus on our chronic offenders as well as our community attorneys, which are housed out in the police precincts. Then we have our 2 other teams that frankly do the bulk of the work. They pretty much do everything the other 2 teams don't do. One of the things that I just wanted to highlight is over the years, we have really grown in our use of our diversion programs. When I first started many years ago, we had a program called Zero Tolerance, and that was kind of the beginning of diversion programs, but it's transformed greatly over the years. Our main programs is working with restorative justice for low-level livability offenses. We made over 270 referrals last year. That partnership has been very great. It allows us a chance to give offenders who commit low-level offenses a chance to keep that offense off their record and hopefully learn something through the community conferencing process by meeting with community members. We've been involved in the driving diversion program since 2010, a way to help some of these people who have dug themselves a very deep hole in getting their license back, get on that path to get their license back so they can drive with valid insurance and license. We started a new program for shoplifting, first-time shoplifting, and we've referred 55 offenses. And last year was our first full year. Again, hoping to give people a chance to keep that theft off their record, but give them a chance to take a class and learn a little bit about maybe what led up to them having to shoplift and how that impacts the store owners. And we have a traffic education class for people who are committing multiple moving violations rather than just simply ask them to plead guilty and have that go on their driving record and increase their insurance rates. We have this traffic education class where, again, they can keep the offense off their record, but they'll go take this class and hopefully learn something about being a little bit better driver. The other thing that our department is very, very proud of is our involvement in the specialty courts. We've been involved with DWI court for repeat drunk driving offenders, trying to not only get them to understand that they shouldn't be drinking or driving, but for most of these people, they're alcoholics. And we try to get them on the path of sobriety because if they're not drinking, then they're not out drinking and driving. And that court's been very successful. We're very involved in our mental health court. This is a big topic that's going to be a big discussion in 2016. What are alternate ways to handle people that have these underlying mental health issues that oftentimes lead to